Hello everyone. Today we are going to cover an introduction to ethics and bias in AI. So mainly we are going to follow this outline. So first of all, we will have kind of let's say recall of AI concepts and relationships. I would say uh, between the different subsets of AI, okay? And next, we will see an introduction to ethics in AI, then an introduction to bias in AI. So mainly, let's start by setting the landscape. So we hear mainly the word AI everywhere. So this is maybe in the news, in job ads, social media, and let's say everywhere. So the thing is that it's often used to describe very different things. So before we talk about ethics, we need to precise about what kind of AI we are actually talking about. So at the largest level, let's say that we have artificial intelligence or AI, which is mainly, I would say, a broad goal, which means we are mainly in this, like, I would say, bigger set, trying to build systems that can reason, that can decide, and that can act. Okay? So, and how this is going to happen mainly, it is in a way that, let's say, resemble or look like human intelligence. Okay, so within AI now, there are multiple subsets. Let's take machine learning. So machine learning is mainly when we don't follow any or hard crafted rules. Okay, so the idea, there is the word learning, like I always mention. So the idea is that in machine learning, we like AI systems, I mean, learn patterns from data. Okay, and this is the key idea, let's say. So what we have that instead of telling a system what to do exactly, and that system is trying to follow some rules to know exactly what to do, we show it some examples, okay, and let the system infer behavior. Okay, so it's going to learn from examples. Now, going deeper, we have deep learning, and deep learning is again a subset of machine learning, subset of AI that like uses kind of layered neural networks in order to extract complex patterns, okay? And this is mainly for images, for text, for speech, and for different data types, okay? But the idea is here that this kind of subsets, let me say, is based on mimicking the function of human brain in sense that it's based on neuron activation, different layers, and so on. Okay, so this is mainly what enable the breakthroughs in like vision, in translation, and in speech recognition. Okay, so mainly the power is coming from deep learning, which has a different subset called generative AI, and it's, I would say, at the core of deep learning. And when it comes to generative AI, it is mainly like the class of models that have the ability to generate different content, to generate text, to generate code, music, and even kind of synthetic videos or voices. Okay, so generative AI is not all of AI, okay? But there are lots of foundation if you will have the opportunity to take any classes focusing on these subsets. So it could be even a complete like different course, okay? So there is a lot of things to learn for each subset. It's not only about generative AI, okay? So, but let's say that generative AI is the most visible nowadays. It's the most powerful, and it's, I would say, the most ethically impactful today, okay? So, um, now, within the still in the context of generative AI, um, so let's say that generative AI, maybe just to summarize the previous idea from previous slide, is about generating different content, okay? And this is mainly the difference uh, as compared to earlier AI systems. Okay, so it's generative AI does not only analyze or predict, it creates. Okay, and this is, I would say, the superpower of generative AI. And now let's say that we are clear on what generative AI is. Let's look at what it can actually do. Okay, so in this slide, I try to summarize some, I would say, core idea applied across multiple modalities. So generative AI can generate text. In other words, it can summarize essays, it can summarize, I would say, reports, or even legal or medical drafts, okay? And this is just by typing or let's say starting from simple prompt, okay? So it can generate images, and this is maybe kind of turning imaginations into visuals that never existed before. And we are dealing with this mainly every day. So it can generate audio and voices as well. Like, for example, customer system agents, assistants, um, the voices that sound like human voices, kind of, let's say, you hear voices generated by AI and you feel like they are emotional, they are multilingual, and so on. Okay, so it's not only text and image, it goes beyond. It can generate code. And the idea here is that instead of having programmers writing code or programs that maybe require a lot of time, sometimes AI is, or generative AI is trained on like uh, massive amounts of code, and it's generated sometimes so like code, let me say, that is probably having, I would say, enough. And in one of my papers, we proven that LLMs were able to generate code which is having, I mean, refactoring code in particular, better than software engineers or humans does, which is really powerful. So generative AI can also generate video and 3D content, okay? It can create some uh, skins, characters, can create new objects that feel, let's say, realistic enough to be mistaken for reality, okay? And so this is very important. So the important thing here is it's not just about the output. It's not about that, okay, we are just creating new content. It's the shifting capability, okay? These tasks, let's say, once required years of human training, and now we can clearly see that they are triggered by few lines of text. Just you're writing your prompt, these tasks are there. Okay, so this is why generative AI is spreading so quickly across domains, industries, I would say, like, for example, education, healthcare, business, art, software engineering, media, and so on. Okay, so now, if like as you are looking at these examples, I want you just to keep through in mind, like not yet ethics, okay? It's just an observation. Now, when creation becomes this easy, or let's say this fast and this is scalable, okay, what changes? Well, just keep this question in mind and we will come back to it later, okay? Or very soon. So now up to this point, we have focused on the capabilities of generative AI in particular, or let's say AI. So we have seen how generative AI can create text, images, audio, code, video, 3D content, and which is in often faster, cheaper, and scalable. No human system ever could be doing that. So, and what brings us to kind of a natural pause. Now, let's take a breath and let's think. Because the question is no longer, can AI do this? So we are sure that AI like already can do it. Okay. The real question is, should it like do it? And how should it do it? Or under what condition AI should do it? So this is mainly the right kind of questions that we need to step back from technology for a moment and return to something very human and try to answer to these questions. Okay, so before we talk about AI algorithms or bias, we need to pause and ask very human questions like what is ethics? And ethics asks two kind, let me say, uh, simple questions mainly. It focuses on what are the good things that worth pursuing in life and what are the right things to do. Okay, so when it comes to ethics, it's mainly these two questions. So ethics is not abstract philosophy or locked in textbooks or books. It's practical and it's about real decisions, real consequences, and real people. So every day, even without like realizing it, we make ethical choices. Like, for example, who do we trust? It makes sense. This is a very ethical question. Whose voices do we listen to? For example, who becomes or who, let me say, benefits from our decisions and who might be harmed probably because of a decision that I may took. So all these questions maybe are centered or focused on ethics, and these are the decisions that we take even that maybe we are not aware. So that's why ethics is often summarized in simply like, let's say, is it good to do these things? Or like, it's about the good things, let's say. So when we are thinking if something is good, it's about ethics. It's also about, am I doing the right thing? So is it the right thing? So it's the second like point on which AI, like ethics, I would say, focuses. And now, let's say, where ethics in AI, let's say, truly begins to matter. It's when humans make decisions, let's say ethics guide us, and this is a fact. But let's think about machines taking decisions because they started already making decisions for or about humans. Okay, so decisions about hiring, decisions about lending, about policing, healthcare, or education. All these applications of AI, they somehow give the lead, I would say, or the opportunity for AI to take the decision. But in this context, we must ask, like, whose ethics are embedded in those systems and what values are being, let's say, optimized and who gets I would say, left out in his like conditions or applications where AI is there. So AI does not invent ethics. I would say, inherits ethics from data, from designers, and from institutions. Probably also, I would say, importantly, from society. So when we study ethics in AI, we are really asking, are AI systems doing good? And are they doing the right thing? So, and the right thing for whom? Okay, so that's the journey that of ethics and bias in AI. Okay, and this is going to be an amazing journey. So, ethics in AI, they, I would say, represent the core idea, or how should I say, the idea that AI systems should align with human values, okay? And not only human values, with social responsibility, okay? So it's not only discussing the performance of AI. AI is there, it's already having great performance. Now, we are discussing the ethical like things from an ethical perspective. Okay, so AI brings together several core principles, and these core principles, they guide how AI systems should be designed and used from an ethical point. So when we talk about ethics in AI, mainly we have um, some, I would say, key points that we are going maybe to focus on these. Okay, so when we discuss about ethics in AI, it's mainly these principles. So the first one is safety and robustness. Okay, so safety and robustness is like when we ask whether AI systems operate reliably, they prevent harm, and continue to behave sensibly when something unexpected occurs or happens. Okay, so next principle is explainability. And explainability, AI systems focuses on transparency and trust. Okay, so can we, let's say, understand why an AI system uh, made some particular decision, and let's say, can that decision be clearly justified or affect like on how it's going to affect users? Okay, so these two questions, if we can answer by yes, so we can understand the decisions made by AI, and we can justify like the results or the impact on potential users. So the answer is yes, then these AI systems are explainable, okay? And they could be trustworthy, okay? So next principle is accountability, which is, I would say, about responsibility, okay? So when an AI system causes, I would say, harm or makes kind of harmful decision, accountability asks, who is responsible? Okay, who is going to assume this responsibility? So what mechanisms exist to address that harm? Okay, so it's not only the AI system is responsible, there are stakeholders, I would say, behind, and this is what we will discuss in accountability. Okay, uh, next, sustainability. And sustainability, I would say, reminds us to think long term. And it considers, I would say, the environmental, societal, and the impact of AI systems, I would say, over time. So it's not just in short terms. Okay, we are talking a lot nowadays with ChatGPT, I would say. So what impact of these talks, I would say, on in the long on in like long term? So if it's going to use that much energy, how it's going to affect our planet, and so on. Okay, so this is mainly things related to sustainability. And then what we have is privacy. And privacy maybe mainly focuses on protecting personal data and also ensuring that people retain control over how the information is controlled, how the information is stored, and how it is used. Okay, so this is mainly for privacy. Next is fairness. And here we ask whether AI systems that like, let's say, they are fair or not. So we answer the question whether AI systems treat individuals or groups equitably. So whether they introduce probably at some points some bias or probably they amplify this bias. Okay, so this is when it comes to fairness. And mainly, so this, I would say, diagram gives the big picture, and each of these principles could be or will be explored in details, okay, in ethics and bias in AI class, or even in this introduction that we are having for now. Okay, so we can have for each of these like principle some use cases, some like case studies, some examples, and real world failures illustrating this like related, sorry, to this principle. Okay, so for now, think of this as the ethical lens, and we will use it like throughout an ethics and bias in AI class, or we are going to go through these points during this class recording, I would say. And the main reason is to evaluate AI systems. So keep this in mind and don't forget this. So we start with the first principle, which is safety and robustness. So at a basic level, this is about trust. So when we deploy an AI system, we expect it to operate reliably, and not just when everything is normal, but when conditions change or something unexpected happens. So safety asks a very simple question. Can this system cause harm? Yes or no? If yes, then this system is not safe. Okay. And if so, so let's say it's not only about saying it's not safe. How do we prevent that harm? Because answering the second question is more important. Okay. So robustness, I would say, goes a step further, and it asks whether the system continues to behave sensibly. Okay. And in case like we have different situations or we encounter um, different setting, I would say, is the system going to continue behaving sensibly when like when it is in different conditions, I would say, or situations, which are because what we have usually, we have a model, and the model is trained to behave in some conditions. So if we take this model out, I would say, of the box or of these typical conditions, so how is it going to behave? Let's take some example to make things more clear. So if there is some noisy data, how would be the output of the system? Or if there are some real world uncertainty, how this model is going to behave. Okay, so this is mainly the idea about behind, I would say, robustness. Okay, so this matters because AI systems don't live in controlled labs or environment. They operate in messy, unpredictable, real world settings. Okay, so this world is full of chaos, and AI is going to be like operating there. Okay, think about AI used in healthcare, AI used in autonomous driving, which is crazy. So, or in security systems, So if in these cases, and they are, I would say, safety critical domains, okay? So a small failure or unexpected behavior can be serious, and let's say can have serious consequences. So safety and robustness are about designing AI systems that fail gracefully instead of catastrophically, let's say, and they anticipate uncertainty and prioritize human well-being over the performance and metrics of the AI system itself. So um, we will look to probably real examples in an ethics and base in AI class, and we can even visualize real cases. Lots of papers are written in this context, and they can show you how, like, some AI models can be created to be performant, to have good accuracy, I would say, but they are not safe to use and they are not robust to perturbations, to attacks, and let's say to if they behave in a real world setting, okay? Next, let's talk about explainability. And as I mentioned, explainability is about transparency and trust. So when an AI system makes a decision, especially I would say decision that can affect people, okay, we should be able to understand why that decision was made. So it's not for a system to be accurate. It's like if, for example, a system denies a loan, or let's say flags a medical risk, like I always give the example of skin cancer or cancer in general. So it's very dangerous. So it's not a joke. Imagine being rejected for a job application. It's not also a joke. This can affect humans. It can like have consequences that go beyond the AI system and extend to the real life. So we need to ask, can this decision be explained? And let's say, can that explanation, I would say, be understood by people affected? So if I'm going to apply for a position, or you are going to apply for a position, and there is no reason, let's say, to be rejected, and the AI system is just not selecting your or my application. So any valid reasons? This would be the question, okay? So explainability matters because AI systems are often treated, I would say, objective or neutral, but without explanations, decision can feel kind of arbitrary. So why? And even if we are technically correct, we need to have the answer for the question why, okay? And this becomes, I would say, especially important in the high stakes domains like we discussed so far in healthcare, in finance, in criminal justice. Think of it, someone is going probably to spend years in uh, uh, prison, or years of freedom, which is not is supposed to be the, I would say, wrong place. So it can affect even other people. So explainability asks us to design systems that don't just output answers. We don't want only to have classification results or predictions, or no, we want answers that can be justified. Okay, you decided that this person is going to be, I would say, free at the time that probably this person committed big crime. So why justify? So if these answers are meaningful in a way, so it can justify the decisions of AI, and that's okay. Next is accountability. So, and I would pause and just tell you that these, when we see AI from the ethical, I would say, lens, it's really amazing, and it's you are going to enjoy this, okay? So because you don't feel that you're having the AI class, you are having something which is touches as humans and our planets, our life, our decisions. And so it's very important, okay? So sorry about this parenthesis. Let me come back to the accountability, which is about responsibility. Okay, we are in the same context. So when AI system makes a decision, let's say, or when, for example, so for accountability, let's say individuals and organizations are responsible for the actions and outcomes of AI systems, ensuring that there are mechanisms to address harm and errors. So also accountability, let's say, ensures that AI systems are not treated as black boxes that, let's say, escape responsibility simply because they are automated. No, we must answer to the question and have a clear answer for who is responsible. Is it the developer? Is it the designer of the model? Or is the organization who or that deployed this model? The person who relied on this output, maybe. And so all these, I would say, stakeholders um, must be like in the picture, I would say. And if we also discuss about accountability, it also means having the mechanisms in place in order to detect the error, to address the error, or to address the harm, and in order to correct the system when things are or go wrong. So without accountability, there is no meaningful oversight, and without oversight, trust in AI systems quickly like erodes. Next, let's talk about sustainability. And I would say sustainability asks us to think beyond immediate performance and short-term benefits, like I mentioned. And when we build and deploy AI systems, we also need to consider their long-term impact. I mean, on society, on people, like I mentioned, on the environment, our planet. And in this context, probably you heard about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you are creating an AI system, it must, let's say, at least address one of several like goals that ensure sustainability. And so in this case, like I mentioned, for sustainability, we think about how much energy and, for example, computational resources these systems consume. I give the example of ChatGPT so far, but we can generalize. And what are the long-term societal like sequences of automating decisions at scale? Also, probably like we need to answer the question, what happens when AI systems are deployed widely across years or even decades? Or so sustainability reminds us that responsible AI isn't about avoiding harm today. It's about ensuring that the systems we build, let's say, remain beneficial and responsible over time. So now let's come to fairness. And fairness in AI is about ensuring that systems treat individuals and groups equitably. So we mentioned this so far. And it makes sure that AI systems are not, I would say, reinforcing or amplifying existing bias. So AI systems, they learn from data, like I said, and data reflects the world as it is. And so not necessarily as it should be, okay? So we'll see this later. So in historical data, for example, there is bias and AI systems, in case like they are trained on that data, they can inherit and even scale that bias, okay? So this means that unfairness in AI is often, I would say, not intentional, but it can still be harmful. So fairness asks us to examine or like check very well who benefits from an AI system, who might be disadvantaged. So, because if someone is like in the hiring system I mentioned, is maybe not accepted while they are competent. So they are assuming, I would say, all these disadvantages of the AI system and whether different groups, for example, are treated differently by the same system. This is one of the like questions that we need to consider. So these questions are especially important, let me say, in like I mentioned, hiring, for example, in lending, in healthcare, in criminal justice, and all these safety, privacy, I would say, or fairness, critical, um, like domains, okay? Because the impact of AI, if based, it could like have long-lasting consequences. Like imagine hiring the wrong person. So it will cause a loss for the company. It will cause, let me say, huge loss. Okay, so this is one of the points that could be covered in an ethics advice in AI class, for example, and probably we can go far and we can study how to measure the fairness and why, like for example, to achieve fairness in um, like more complex um, uh, systems is useful, okay? And why we really need to work on having a fair AI, let me say. Finally, let's talk about privacy. So privacy in AI is about protecting personal data, okay? And when I say protecting personal data, we can also think about ensuring that individuals retain control over their information. It's not only about like protection, okay? So AI systems often rely on large, I would say, amounts of data. And sometimes, like deeply personal data, such as, like, for example, location or health records or financial information or online behavior, like these are examples. So in this case, let me say privacy can ask important questions like what, let me think, uh, the question could be what data is being collected. Okay. And uh, if we're collecting some data, how are we going to use this data? And who is going to have the ability to access to that data? And let's say that someone is having the ability to access to that data for how long? Is it forever or how come? So it also reminds us like that just because data can be collected does not mean it should be used like without clear purpose and consent. Okay, so in the context of AI, privacy is closely connected to trust. Okay, and if people do not trust how their data is handled, they are less likely to trust the systems built on that data. Okay, so this is one of the points that we can go also through, I would say deeply or with more details, and we can maybe see some privacy preserving techniques or real world data misuse cases and the trade-off between performance and privacy. So it's extremely interesting and um, great. So now mainly we are done with the principles of ethics in AI, and let's move to second topic, which is the bias in AI. So um, if we come back to the framework, I would say, of ethics, we covered it, or we, let's say, discussed the fairness, the accountability, the responsibility, the safety and robustness, and these principles. So these are related to ethics, like I mentioned. But when it comes to bias, it's mainly where these ethical ideas become concrete and measurable. Okay, so mainly this is the difference. So bias in AI refers to the systematic and unfair differences in how an AI system behaves or makes decisions. So, importantly, I would say bias in AI is rarely intentional. Okay, so most AI systems do not choose to be um, discriminate, for example. So instead, what we have bias often emerges. We need to discuss the reasons. So because mainly AI systems learn from data, and that data reflects the historical pattern, like I was mentioning so far. That data could also reflect the social inequalities, even, or the data, because humans are collecting data, okay? So it can reflect human decisions also. So when an AI system produces biased outcomes, it's not inventing bias. It's often, I would say, revealing or amplifying or scaling bias that already existed, okay? And this is why bias in AI is just such, I would say, central ethical issue. So it directly affects people's opportunities, access, and treatments also, okay? So to understand bias in AI, we need to understand where it comes from, where, sorry, it comes, or where it comes from, okay? So one major source, mainly there are three sources that we will cover today. So the first one is database, okay? So who is represented, who is missing? Because like, as you can see in this like image, what we have, let's say the word, or in maths we consider omega, it's the whole universe, or let me say here is uh, all people, okay? And I'm going, for example, to study, let's say, or create an AI system for skin cancer classification. So mainly I would need to have access to some images of skin cancer lesions. So from where I will get that? From the whole like group, I need to select like from the population a few, I would say, samples that I can, maybe they will allow me to take the picture of their lesions, let's say. Okay, and then the AI system is going to decide if it's malignant or benign and do the work. But the selection process of that people, okay, how? Okay, it can, I would say, introduce what we call a historical bias. Okay, I can, for example, select some people who are having lighter skin tones, and maybe I will not consider some people with darker skin tones. And if my AI system is only trained on skin lesions that coming from lighter skin like color, and suppose that day someone is using my app and he has a darker skin color, so how my AI system is going to behave? So it's going to be biased, and this bias is mainly created because of the like data, okay? And historical bias, like I mentioned before, comes from the fact that people themselves are biased, process are biased, and the society is biased, okay? So any data set involving humans can have this kind of bias, whether like the example I mentioned, which is medical data, or also for sales data or any other domain, we humans are taking the decisions and making these choices, even if it's random, so it can have that impact, okay, or that cause that bias. And another source is design and modeling choices. So here decisions about what features to include and objective to optimize, and how success is measured in this case can also introduce bias. Okay, so okay, this method is works, and with this accuracy percentage, who guarantees? And I wish you understood the concept. So even when developers sometimes have good intention and they measure with their like available measurements, the like let's take the example of the model, the accuracy of the model, but the model could be accurate, cannot be robust, for example. So these measurements usually, even that it's not intentional, but they are invented by humans, let me say. So the third source is deployment and context of use. So bias can also emerge during deployment, which is like in case like we have a system and that system is well, I would say in one context. Um, it can have some unfair like behavior, I would say, when we are using it in a different context, or I would say for a different population or different environment. So what makes space particularly challenging is that it can be invisible. Okay, so this is very serious issue. So a system can appear or look like we can think that okay, this is an accurate system overall, while still harming specific groups. Okay, so you can see here I was discussing so far the example of skin tones, which is very important. Okay, in some country probably the model could be trained more. That's the available data on some like lighter skin, so skin color. So if we have this is for fingerprint. So if we have darker skin colors can make a problem, okay? So that's why studying bias in AI is, I would say, not optional. It is essential for building ethical and trustworthy systems, okay? So it looks like being a very interesting like field and domain that we can enjoy going through different use cases and all. So, but mainly this was a brief introduction to ethics and bias in AI and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.